Hello and welcome. Coming to you live from a secret, undisclosed location high in the Hollywoodland Hills. This is the Revenge of the Party Nerds podcast. I'm Richard Gabai here with my pal, Mr. Robert Carradine, to be referred to only as Bobby going forward. Bobby,
Yes,
how
sir.
the hell are you, man?
Damn fine, thank you.
You know, funny and interesting how we're sitting here together now at Best Friends, basically in my living room, which is why it's an undisclosed location. I mean, I like friends.
We don't know where your living room is.
Correct. When I was a kid, my two favorite comedies were Animal House and Revenge of the Nerds. So when I got out of college and I decided I was going to be a big movie producer, director, and movie star, I ripped off your movie and made Assault of the Party Nerds.
And that was definitely a capable effort.
It was an effort.
Yeah, well, most movies are.
Have you seen Assault of the Party Nerds?
Maybe.
Well, that's why I think we're still friends. You haven't actually seen it.
Ah, okay.
So anyway, as we jump forward in life, so here we are now, best possible pals, but I want to go back even farther. Because when I first met you, I was but a child, and I was at a movie theater, the Edwards Cinema in Costa Mesa, California, where my mom dropped my brother and David and I off at the theater with $2, which was enough for both of us to get admission, for us to share popcorn, to see The Cowboys, starring John Wayne, and I did not know it was starring my future best buddy and co-host, Robert Carradine.
Yeah, you know, it's funny you should mention The Cowboys because that was my first film. And about a week into the movie, we're shooting a scene where John Wayne breaks up a fight between me and A. Martinez. And he tells me to get back on the fence of the horse corral where I belong. And I said, "Excuse me, Mr. Wayne." I actually stopped him and said, "I don't think you should tell me to get on the fence where I belong. I think you should just tell me to get back on the fence because I'm the head kid." Oh boy, that went over real well. 1 week into a 15-week shoot with John Wayne, and I'm trying to tell him how to do a scene.
And it was your first movie.
Yes, 17 years old.
So basically at 17, you already had balls of steel.
Or I was just an asshole. Yeah, you got no comeback for that, do you?
I'll leave that one right there. But I remember loving that movie and moving forward. And then, as divine providence would have it, I'm producing a movie for Fox called Supercross. And one of the actors is one Robert Carradine. Now, am I allowed to tell the story of our first interaction in the bus?
Okay,
So I'm on the set, and I wanted to talk to Bobby. I kind of wanted to thank him, like, hey, I ripped off your movie to start my career. And, we had like this nice bus for the big stars like Bobby. And he's up there playing guitar. And he just sat there and like played guitar and played guitar and played guitar. And I was like, oh, you know. And he just looks at me and he goes, "Pretty good for an actor, huh?" And now Bobby plays lead guitar in my rock and roll band.
Yeah,
You
pretty
say
good
that
for-
never happened. But hey, Max, bring up that photo of me and Bobby from Supercross.
Yeah, what's that picture?
Yeah. Oh, wait. That's a great photo.
It really
That's
is.
not me and
Can you text
Bob.
that photo to me? I really like that.
No, bring up the photo of me and Bobby. So this is really, you can't linger on that one too long. So there we go. There's
wow.
the revenge nerd and the party nerd meeting in the flesh for the first time.
Oh my God.
So how did you get involved with Supercross?
I think it was an offer from the director, Steve Boyum. That's what I think.
Have you heard-
I didn't audition for that film.
Steve is a great guy, a common friend of both of us.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but going back to that whole beginning, so you end up in The Cowboys. How did that happen?
Well, my brother David was being considered for the Bruce Dern role, and he didn't want to be the guy that shot John Wayne in the back. He did mention, however, that there are a bunch of young cowboys in this movie. I should go in and meet those people. And I said, I'm not interested. No thanks, leave me alone. And he's like, well, you got everything to gain and nothing to lose. And I took that to heart. I had everything to gain and nothing to lose. So I went in and I met these people, and they had me do a scene that took place in the schoolhouse in the movie, where my character has to read a poem in front of Mr. Will Anderson, John Wayne. And I was scared and nervous, which I absolutely was at this audition, and I nailed it.
But can you imagine now saying, oh, I don't want to star in a movie with John Wayne. I don't want to do that. Or even, I don't know how Keith would feel now, like, oh, I don't want to shoot somebody in the back. I mean, we don't, I mean, especially in the state of the business now, I mean, of course there are jobs that you wouldn't take or I wouldn't take, but it's not major motion pictures.
Name one job that you wouldn't take.
Well, remember when you called me from that bar?
Which bar? The casting office?
Anyway, we both know the kind of jobs we wouldn't take.
Yeah.
That whole thing with your brother, and then maybe more importantly your dad, the great John Carradine. Was he happy about that when you started doing that film with John Wayne?
Yeah, he was. In fact, I have a photograph of him on the set with me and John Wayne, and it's pretty cool. Don't tell me, do you have that photo?
Max, do we have the photo of John Carradine, John Wayne, and Robert Carradine?
We'll pick that up.
We'll pick that up, okay.
Pick that up
Yeah.
and get it in there.
All right.
We have to get it in.
Isn't that a
Totally.
great photo, Richard? Of
Totally.
Me and the Duke and my dad?
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. I've come across so many great photos of the Carradines and the dynasty that you're a part of.
Yes, my daughter is an actress of note, and Keith's daughter, Martha Plimpton, is an actress of note. David's daughter, Kansas, has done a little acting. So yeah, the torch has been passed.
How do you think it's all changed over these years from starting out there with John Wayne and kind of thinking, oh, I don't know if I want to do this movie, to now?
Well, the main change is that the unemployment benefits are really good when you work in a John Wayne movie.
So did you maintain a relationship with John Wayne? I mean, I'm curious about this stuff. Like I would want to, like after the movie, I would want to, like, did you ever hang out with the Duke like in Newport Beach on his boat? Or like, you know, hey Bobby, let's go slam some beers, you know?
Well, the one interaction that did happen after the movie was I saw him in the commissary at Warner Brothers Studios. And I thought, should I say hi to him? Yeah, what the heck? So I went over to him, I said, hi, Mr. Wayne. He looks up at me, like kind of for a long time. And he goes, Carradine. Right. Carry on, lad. That was the interaction.
All right.
Yeah.
But you did tell me a funny story about when we were having over drinks a while ago. But didn't John Wayne mention ham to you once? That was a funny story.
Oh, well, that was basically another interaction with the Duke. There's a scene where A. Martinez and I are fighting yet again.
Uh-huh.
And A. Martinez pulls a knife on me. And Duke breaks us up. And he kicks A. Martinez off of his ranch. And then he says to the assembled cowboys, he says, any of you that has something that shoots, I don't care if it's a pea shooter, you put it in the back of that wagon right there. And then the tag for this scene is the littlest kid has a Walker Colt, which is like literally that big. Mm-hmm. Well, he holds it right in front of the lens, so it looks like it's that big. The kid looks like he's that big. It's, you know, a little comedic end tag to the scene, right?
Right.
Well, Robert Carradine, the thinking actor, figured that he's so happy to finally have a gun that he's going to be reluctant to give it up. And you know how the holster has a lanyard on it to hold it to your leg? Mm-hmm. Well, the lanyard wasn't long enough for a bow. I had to tie a square knot. So the moment comes when we have to turn in the guns, and I couldn't get that knot undone. So meanwhile, all the other cowboys are turning in their guns, and I'm the last one in. And Duke has already started the tag of the scene. Uh-huh. When I walk past him, and I bump him in the stomach with my elbow as I throw the gun into the back of the wagon. He goes, cut! Carradine, God damn it, you're a bigger ham than your old man ever was.
I love that story.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And speaking of the Duke, our trusty producers, Brad and Max, have pulled up that very photo.
There it is, me and the dad and the Duke.
Those are 3 movie star smiles there.
Boy, I'll say.
So what is that? That must feel good to see. Or your dad had to be bionically proud of you.
I think he definitely was. He used to say that once my daughter and Keith's daughter became actors, he said, "I've created a dynasty."
Nice.
Yeah.
And it's not bragging if you can prove it.
Yeah, well, he's got the proof.
So what happened next? So Bobby is like, he's an uncle to my kids. He's a brother. He's at the house maybe sometimes once a week for dinner, sometimes twice, sometimes not for 6 months if either one of us is working. But we're that close. And so because you did the Cowboys, right?
Yeah.
You didn't get to graduate from Hollywood High.
That's correct.
And we started a whole campaign, man. We went after Hollywood High. We said, give this man an honorary degree. And apparently their academic standards are so high that a film career that spans 50 years isn't worthy of a high school diploma from Hollywood High. They absolutely refused an honorary degree.
Well, you know that show I did, Lizzie McGuire?
Yes.
They had a teacher from Hollywood High that was teaching the kids.
Right.
So I approached Hollywood High and I said, if I take American history with the kids on the set, can I get my diploma? They said no.
Well, they have I drove by Hollywood High just the other day, and I could look at that school and tell they have very high academic standards.
Well,
and there's no way that you should have a degree from that institution.
Oh, okay. Well, they have a very high standard.
A very high standard. So you do the Cowboys, you get home, and then what happens next? Where were you living at the time?
In Laurel Canyon with my brother David. He had a little house, and it had a guest house, and that was my pad.
Right, that's pretty cool. So
Yes.
you leave high school to go do the Cowboys. Your future is on hold because you don't have a high school degree.
Right.
You come back home, you're in Laurel Canyon, hanging with your brother, and whatever he's hanging with at the time.
Well, he was hanging with Barbara Hershey,
He was hanging with Barbara Hershey.
and they had a band together where she played the flute, he played the guitar, and it was called Water. In fact, we were on The Tonight Show with George Carlin hosting. That's a piece of tape I would love to have.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So what happened next career-wise?
It was about an 18-month gap, and I got a part on Bonanza.
For a minute, you were just Western. They said,
Yeah.
this guy can do Westerns.
Right, and then the next thing was I did Kung Fu with my brother David. I played a mute, and my father was in the episode as well. And every day when I went to set, the crew would say, "You know your lines?"
Yeah, but I mean, that was funny.
Yeah, it was.
And you remember the good old days when nepotism was a thing?
Yeah, I remember that.
Right? I mean, I was on my brother's show with my dad, and
Yeah,
and your brother was playing an Asian character.
yeah.
People seemed to be okay with it at the time.
Well, he was half Asian.
Right. Oh, that's right. That's right.
So what they did was they added a little bit of makeup to his eyes to make it look like he might be part Asian. Mm-hmm. And he talked funny.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That was like, so did you feel kind of like, well, am I me, or am I my brother's little brother, or my father's son? Like, when did you feel like you nailed it? Was it Revenge of the Nerds?
Well, Revenge of the Nerds, I have felt and I continue to feel that I should have been nominated for that role because it couldn't have been farther from who I was.
Right, because you were a motorcycle racing,
Car racing,
car racing,
biker
dude, running around with all kinds of phenomenally hot actresses, and then you play this nerd.
Yeah, the
you
geek.
invented the nerd in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, Bill Gates owes a lot to me.
Bill, did you send Bobby his stock options? You know, he's waiting.
You know, I knew I shouldn't have sold that Microsoft stock. Oh, well.
Okay, so the Cowboys, a couple of TV episodes.
Right?
Was there something before Revenge of the Nerds?
Oh, yeah, there was Policewoman with Angie Dickinson. Oh, Massacre at Central High with Andrew Stevens.
Our mutual pal, Andrew Stevens.
Mutual pal.
We definitely need to have Andrew on our show.
Oh, I think he'd have a good time here.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, just various independent movies would come and go. And then the next kind of big one was The Long Riders with all my brothers, the Keach brothers, the Quaid brothers, and the Guest brothers. The Jesse James gang story.
Right.
So that was the first, like, big one to come along. Then I did the Big Red One with Lee Marvin.
As time goes by, like, even me as a friend and a fan, like the order gets, we jumped to Revenge of the Nerds, but the Big Red One I saw in movie theaters. And of course, we screened that new cut you had here at the house
Right.
for the kids.
Yes, the reconstruction, the Big Red One, the reconstruction. It's worth watching.
Take us back to the set of the film with Andrew Stevens, because that was a romp, right?
Oh, yeah. In fact, that film, I had my daughter on set. I was raising a daughter by myself, so I had to take her everywhere. It was like having a dog, you can't leave it alone. And I wanted to go to the Bob Bondurant Racing School in Sonoma County.
Right.
So I convinced the production to pay me early. They said, well, if we pay you early, we're only going to give you $750 instead of $1,000. I said, okay. So in the subsequent press release, they said, Mr. Carradine expertly negotiated his deal from $1,000 to $750 so he could go to racing school. That happened on the set of Massacre at Central High.
Right. Right. And I guess I know there are some really engaging stories about Andrew and Bobby on that set, but maybe we'll save those for another episode.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, when Andrew's here, he can defend himself.
Exactly.
So Central High, and then Big Red One. You shot Big Red One in Israel, right?
That's correct. And as you probably know, Israel is on the verge of war all the time, defending itself. We're on the location, and we're going to work, and there's these totally Gal Gadot hotties standing around hitchhiking with their Uzis. I mean, I couldn't believe it. What an incredible country.
Yeah, it is the biggest little country in the world, that's for sure. But maybe we got to go back there and shoot another movie.
I think so.
So how about Mean Streets?
That was right at the beginning, sort of right after the Cowboys. And Martin Scorsese had just shot a movie, Boxcar Bertha, starring David and Barbara Hershey.
Uh-huh.
So he asked David to come on the set and play this walk-on role. And
He walked off with the girl.
no, I
he
shot
already
him.
was with her?
No, I shot him.
Oh.
In Mean Streets, I shoot him in the back.
Oh, wow.
But he plays a guy that's so drunk, he doesn't know he's been shot. He just gets pissed off and beats me up all the way across the bar. And we shot that in L.A., and then the exterior was shot in New York of these two guys finishing up their fight.
Wow. So how is it, what's it like to be on the set with Martin Scorsese?
Well, I had really long hair at the time, and I didn't want to cut it for a day's work. I really liked my long hair. So he had me pull it back behind my collar, and I turned my collar up on my coat to hide the long hair. And all day long, he keeps asking various crew members, does his hair look all right to you? Does his hair look all right to you? Does that look weird? So finally, David's character goes into the bathroom, and I go follow him into the bathroom to kill him. And it's over the shoulder. And Martin Scorsese can't stand it any longer. He says, okay, just take your hair out from behind your collar and then shoot him. So I did that. And now in film school, when they talk to Martin Scorsese, they say, in Mean Streets, when that killer kills David Carradine, what is the significance of him pulling out his hair? They think it's like this esoteric moment, like some
Fabio moment.
A ritual.
A ritual.
Yeah.
So you haven't had lunch since.
No, we haven't. We had a temporary shutdown from the Teamsters because we were shooting and not using the Teamsters. And I had the pistol in my pocket. And I said to Marty, I said, hey, I'll just take this out. He goes, put that away. So I had to put the gun away.
So between drawing a gun and not cutting your hair,
Right.
he didn't call you for
The Departed?
The Departed or, oh well. But a really important one that we haven't touched on,
Uh-oh.
Coming Home.
Oh, yeah. That was an incredible experience. I remember the scene that we shot in the park where I have to play my guitar, and then I can't play it anymore, and I kind of break down. I was scared to death because it was John Voight and Jane Fonda. Mm-hmm. Oh, man. And I was nervous as a cat. So I'm sitting there, and the director, Hal Ashby, says, okay, what do you guys think was happening right before this moment? And John Voight says, well, I think I just smoked a joint. And the prop man instantly handed John Voight a joint, and him and Al Ashby smoked it. And that's what we did for the rest of the day. So
Wow.
I felt like Hal sensed my nervousness and gave me a reprieve.
But however, that was a beautiful and wonderful performance.
Thank you.
And I know that Jane Fonda thanked you personally on the Oscars. I
Yes, she
remember
did.
that.
I do too.
The winner is Jane Fonda. And I want to thank Penny Milford and Bobby Carradine and Bruce Dern and my pal John Voight.
A real high point.
And that's another person we should call.
Jane
Yeah.
and John. Let's call John.
Yeah, John is a great guy, and Jane, and I don't want to bring up any of your famous ex-girlfriends, but if you did, and we wanted to have them on the show, it would be really fun, right?
It would be. I have their phone numbers. Oh, wow.
There's rock and roll Robert Carradine, and I will say, all kidding aside, for an actor, he's a pretty good guitar player. He's a great guitar player.
Thank you.
We've gotten a chance to, not only to continue our friendship and what's become family, you and me, but we got to work together a few times. So we did Supercross, and then I made Call of the Wild with Christopher Lloyd and
Right.
Veronica Cartwright and other people we hopefully have on our show in the future. But
Yeah.
we had a premiere at the Santa Barbara Film Festival, which was a huge honor for me. It's very prestigious. And I knew that you lived in Santa Barbara. So I don't know if you remember, but I called you up, and we hadn't seen each other. So 2005, I think, 2006 was Supercross, and then Call of the Wild was like 2009, 2010.
Really?
Yeah, so I called up Bobby, and I
Wow.
said, hey, my movie is premiering at the Santa Barbara Film Festival, and it's at that huge theater. There was like 1,500 people in that
The
theater.
Granada.
The Granada, and it was going to be packed. But anyway, I asked you to come and support the movie, and Bobby
did.
being Bobby, there you go. There we are on the red carpet at the Santa Barbara Film Festival. The amazing thing about that evening is that our mutual friend Christopher Lloyd, who starred in my movie, he was coming. He drove up, and he saw like 2,000 people because it was full. They had a Clint Eastwood tribute in that same theater, and it
Right.
was like 1,000 people were there, right?
Right.
But for Call of the Wild, it was like a matinee, and I guess because it was a film that parents could bring their kids to, and it was in digital 3D, which was novel at the time. The first independent digital 3D feature, I might like to brag, that was theatrically released. But anyway, Chris turned around and left because he was nervous with the crowd.
Yeah, he was overwhelmed.
He was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So I had another movie star there supporting the film, but Chris left. The whole other cast was there except for Chris.
Yeah.
So we became reacquainted, and then I read in the paper a few years after that about this horrible traffic accident you had.
Oh, that. Yeah, that was a bad one. Head on with a diesel truck.
And I remember just texting you. I was like, hey, Bobby, I read in the trades about this horrible accident.
Right.
And are you okay?
If
And
you
I-
got a response, it was probably from one of my kids.
Right.
that
I
was
got a response. Yeah, I'm on the mend. It's going to be a while. And
Meanwhile, I was in a coma.
right.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's what they tell me. I don't remember.
every few days I was trading messages probably with Marika or Ian.
Or Ian, yeah,
Whoever
exactly,
was
yeah.
around. And then I got the opportunity to make this Western called Justice in New Mexico
Right.
with Stephen Lang and a really great cast, Nathan Parsons. Hopefully maybe some of them will get on this show with us. And I remember I just texted you and I said, hey, Bobby, are you ready to come back to work? And I was like, this would be a sweet little part for Bobby. And, you're iconic in the Western genre.
Yes, I
And
am.
I mentioned to the producer, I was like, hey, Robert Carradine's a good buddy of mine. Maybe we could. And he was like, okay, well, you can call him. Are you ready to go back to work? And of course, admittedly, you really weren't ready to go back to work. But thank goodness your brother Keith said, you're ready to get back to work and get out of my house.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, did I tell you that the morning of the flight to New Mexico, I was going to call you and cancel? That's how nervous I was.
And you were bringing my guitar
I know.
because we were going to play. So we started playing music together.
Right.
On
When
that
I
set.
brought my
Yeah.
guitar also, but I was so protective of your guitar, I left my guitar at the curbside check-in. It could have been gone like that.
Now looking back, the now very funny story is, you and I meet. So the producer, you say you'll do it, and the producer says, okay, he can be hired, and I guess he called your manager or whatever. However, it got done.
Right. It got done.
And I was like, Bobby, so let's want to have breakfast. And so we met at this place in town called The Good Neighbor, where a lot of guys like us go to have breakfast. Now we can look back and it's humorous, and because you're in great shape and you're working like crazy again, everything's fine. But I mean, it was not Bobby frickin' Carradine, as I called
No,
you.
I was in a subdued state.
Yeah,
Yes.
Bobby was like, we're having breakfast, and he's like, Bobby was like eating in slow motion and this, and I was like, whoa, Bobby. But anyway, but the ship had sailed, right? I told the producer, like, my friend Robert Carradine, and da-da-da. Now everyone's all excited because the guy from the Long Riders,
Cowboys,
and the guy from the
yeah.
Cowboys, and the guy from all these, now he's playing. Now, you know, that's the thing about making a movie. Like, you pitch somebody, and they act like, oh, well, maybe we'll let your friend in the movie, or maybe we'll, and then when you're doing it, all of a sudden, it's like, you know, now it's the plan.
Yeah.
Now you've committed, and I didn't want to. So I was like, okay, well, we'll be okay. It's the morning. He just hasn't had his coffee yet. He's not.
Exactly.
He's
I
not
hadn't had
feeling
my
quite
coffee.
right.
Yeah.
Then we. I get to New Mexico and I'm prepping, and our cinematographer, the very brilliant Scott Peck, is the hugest Revenge of the Nerds fan on the planet. He's like, Robert Carradine's doing this movie. He's quoting every line. He's doing the laugh. Like, he can't wait to meet you, right?
Oh boy.
And I was like, Bobby, are you here? Yeah, I'm in the room. I'm in the room. It's like, Bobby, let's go get some food. The DP wants to meet you. Okay. So we go to lunch. Me and Scott, we're doing all the talking, and Bobby's just kind of sipping his beer. And we walked out of the restaurant, and Scott said to me, Richard, is Bobby going to be able to do this? And I went, of course, sure. And I was right. You nailed it. You were great in the film. The film came out wonderfully. And they have a picture of us on set. You know,
yeah, look at us.
The revenge nerd and the party nerd continue to flourish, thank God.
Yeah.
And yeah, you nailed it, and the film did really well. Universal
But also,
picked it up.
you know, my resurgence as an actor, I owe it entirely to you.
Oh man, thank you.
I mean, if you hadn't put me in that movie, who knows, man? I might still be at my brother's house.
Yeah, Keith calls me like once a week. Hey, Rich, thanks for moving my brother out of my house. Now you got your own cool place back in Hollywood. There's not too much to complain about. How about Stephen Lang?
How about Stephen Lang?
What a great
Slang.
Slang. That's right.
You got sly and you got slang.
Correct. Our producer Brad wants to know how Revenge of the Nerds came about.
The title of the film was so off-putting to me, I didn't even want to meet. But my agent convinced me I should at least go meet them. So I go to 20th Century Fox on my motorcycle. This is pre-helmet era in California. So my hair is just like, and I walk in and I meet Jeff Canoe, the director. And I don't know, we don't really get along per se. And the meeting ends, and I go back out and I get on my bike. I go, that ain't going anywhere. So they want to have me come back in and audition. And I don't want to do that. My agent says, listen, this is a studio film. You really need to go in on this. I said, okay. So I don't want to leave anything to chance. I'm going to show these suckers. So I get my hair cut in a regular boy's haircut, which is really short. And I went to an optometrist shop, and I got the glasses that I wore in the movie. In fact, when I went into the optometrist shop, I'm looking at all these frames, and they're like $300-400. I can't believe it. And the optometrist says, well, you can't put just anything in front of your eyes, young man. I said, well, I'm playing a nerd. I didn't even want to say it out loud. So he says, oh, a nerd. And I'm like, yeah. He goes in the back of his business, and he comes out with a shoebox, and he blows the dust off the top, opens it up, and it's full of those glasses that engineers wear at NASA. And I put them on, I go, perfect. So I go to the audition. This all happened on the same day. I go to the audition, and they walk out of the office to get me. They look right at me, they look the other way, and they go back in. I'm like, wow, that's weird. So it happens again. I go, excuse me, I have a 2 o'clock with you guys? They go, Bobby? I go, yeah. And they go, oh my God. And they take me into the office. I do a lackluster audition, but I get the job.
Right, because don't you think that you've done a little bit of directing, and I've done a bunch of directing and casting and acting. I really think that way more than 50% is the look.
So I got the part, and there's a thing in the script that refers to my character as having a honking laugh. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't even really worry about it. And it's the day before we're going to start shooting, and we're having like a kickoff party. And I said to the director, Jeff Canoe, I said, hey man, I don't have the laugh. He goes, you don't? I said, no. He says, here, watch this. And he stuck in the audition tape from James Cromwell. And James Cromwell's doing the laugh. And I was like,
wow.
Oh my God. So I find James on at the party. I go, hey man, your laugh is really fucked up. And he says, that's not my laugh. I go, it's not? He says, no. I said, it's a technique? He says, yeah. I said, oh, show me how to do it. So he taught me the laugh at the party. The next day, the first day of production, we're in the station wagon and we're driving to school, got the cruise control lock on 35, well, let's run on up to 38. And we turn and look at each other and we do the laugh in stereo. Oh.
All right, so if you do the laugh and then I do it, we'll be doing it in stereo. Will you give us the laugh?
Not
Is that
even
good?
close, no.
One more. How's it go? No.
Sorry, Richard.
That's the difference between a revenge nerd and a party nerd. A revenge nerd can do the revenge nerd laugh. A party nerd can drink. Something like that.
Something like that.
But did you give him some residuals for the laugh, or?
Well, if I had $1 for every time I was asked to do the laugh, I'd have a house.
A bigger house.
Bigger house, yes.
But that's a life-changing movie, right? Because that's a huge hit. Like that's why somebody like me was so excited to sort of be a nerd in high school.
Well, did you know that part of my deal on that show is I had a participation in the net returns on the movie.
Wow.
So the movie was shot for $6 million. It made $42 million, and it didn't turn a profit. Like I'm getting these statements, and I'm watching the debt go lower and lower and lower, and it gets down to like, $100,000. I'm thinking, wow, next statement, I'm going to get a participation. I get the next statement, it's back up to $2 million.
Right, because the studios cross-collateralize their expenses over all the movies.
You know what they cross-collateralized us over?
What?
The Dolly Parton, Sylvester Stallone movie, Rhinestone.
Right.
Right.
Because as a businessman, like, you have your own production company, I have my own production company. And like if we make money on one project and we lose money on the other project, we do the same thing.
Yeah.
It just really pisses us off when a
Yeah, it
studio
does.
does it and we don't get to make money.
But on Nerds 2,
Uh-huh.
I had a percent of the gross that kicked in around 5 million and stopped at 20 million. This is a nice piece.
So it worked out.
It worked out. I mean, that amount of time that it took to make that money was about 2 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because the second film made almost as much as the first.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
and it's not as good a movie.
Revenge of the Nerds is good on so many levels. In fact, it's so good that you can't even find it streaming now because it's now controversial, right?
Yes, we did some stuff back then that they don't do now, and they don't approve of it now.
Right, and in some ways they're correct.
In
For
some
sure,
ways,
for
yes.
sure. And the same thing with me, with my ripoff, Assault of the Party Nerds. I mean, there's jokes in that film that make me blush. I'm like, what? How? What was I doing? Like people's like, we on the set last night. This art girl was talking to me. She goes like, Assault of the Party Nerds. I've seen the trailer and I've heard about it. I'm gonna go home and watch that tonight. And I said, no, I want you to like me on the next movie because our sensibilities have completely changed. But I'm against cancellation. I mean, I'm not going to stop distributing Assault of the Party Nerds and Revenge of the Nerds. I mean, it was a different time, right?
Yeah. In my opinion, Revenge of the Nerds is one of the funniest films to be made in the 80s.
And also, it birthed so many other ripoffs, other than mine. Mine's like the least important ripoff. But I mean,
Well,
it
you
just
had
started
the
these
name.
whole.
You had the name in your title.
Well, the thing that's interesting is that was a distributor, and it's talking about how the business works.
Yeah.
My movie was called The Last Party, and the whole idea was, that this lackluster fraternity, and I shot it at my fraternity house at USC. I shot it right after I got out of college. People asking which fraternity, like Mark Zuckerberg or like what's his name in The Social Network, AE Pi, the Jewish fraternity. But anyway, so we shot it at the AE Pi house. And the whole idea was they had to throw this big party to save the fraternity and keep the house, or whatever the, ridiculous plot as a setup for jokes was.
Right.
And the distributor was like, the last party, that's depressing. Who wants to go to the last party? Who wants to see the last party? And then like later that year, apparently like this art film that really was depressing came out called The Last Party.
So you couldn't use it?
No, he convinced me not to. And he's an Italian guy, the great Marco Colombo. I'm always in debt. Marco, wherever you are, thank you.
Yeah, Marco.
He said, no, assault of the party nerds. Like in that, I can't do the Italian accent, and I said, oh, I kind of get it. And there was this other movie that was
Assault of the Party nerds.
Yeah. There was a movie that came out right around the same time called Assault of the Killer Bimbos.
Perfect.
And I said, oh, okay. And I mean, that became it. And by the way, and I'm glad this Revenge of the Party Nerds podcast, so many people have said to me, oh, Richard, I love your movie, Revenge of the Party Nerds. And I stopped correcting people. It's like people that pronounce my name wrong. It's like, who cares? So
Siri pronounces your name wrong.
well, I mean, how much do you want from AI?
I'm just
AI
saying.
isn't there yet. I mean,
Okay.
we're getting there. We're getting there. Not everybody can be named Robert Carradine and come from an acting dynasty,
Not everybody.
Or as I've learned, your father would say, Robert, right?
Robert. Okay, so when we were out playing around, when we grew up in Northridge, when it was dinner time, like daylight savings, and we're out, we're supposed to come in when the street lights go on, but daylight savings, so it's still light out when we're going to have dinner. He'd walk out the front door and go, Robert, Keith, Christopher, dinner, and in we'd go.
Wow. But
He
you also,
had this booming voice.
and in fact, then didn't you also, because you kind of live, you say you grew up, but I mean, you also grew up a lot of places, right?
Well, the famous place we grew up was in Calabasas. There's a museum there for the Leonis adobe.
Right.
We were in that adobe for 5 years.
And that explains a lot, because there's a very famous story that I'll lead Bobby into that he shared with us. In fact, and we shared it with the docent at the museum, the Leonis Adobe Museum, which more importantly is right next door to the Sagebrush Cantina, which has an incredible happy hour.
I managed to crawl through the railing on the second floor of the Leonis adobe, and I fell into a pile of freshly sifted dirt that my father had sifted to get ready for the garden he was going to plant. And that pile of dirt was right next to a brick walkway. So here I am.
But that does kind of explain some things about,
Yeah, maybe it was the fall. Maybe it was the dog that bit me in the mouth because I was throwing his food at him.
oh.
Maybe that's why I went over the edge.
But the woman at the Leonis Adobe was like, Mr. Carradine, would you please come back? I want to document this story, and I want this to be included in our master book. And he went, no, no. He's still saying no. He's still passing on projects.
Yep.
So, but you also grew up in this neighborhood where we are,
Yeah,
in the
in fact-
Holly Woodland Hills.
Right.
Secret location.
Right down the street from this house. And I went to the Calabash Elementary School.
Right.
I talked my opponent who wanted to fight out of a fight.
Bobby, meet me at the water fountain. We're going to fight.
That's exactly what it was.
That's where the fights always happen.
Yeah,
They say,
so-
meet by the water fountain after school.
Well, anyhow, before the fight, he was after me. He was an upperclassman. He must have been in 6th grade, and I was
Right.
in 2nd. And I was fleeing down the hallway, an exterior hallway that had these pillars holding up the roof. And I looked behind me to see if he's gaining. And I turned back and bam, right into one of those pillars. So that's another instance where that could have created the persona that you're talking to at this moment.
Right. Well,
Richard, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Robert, yes.
Yes.
I don't know if it's appropriate, but I have to segue to it because it is important. I have two fight stories in the history of my growing up. One is the first, we had just moved from New York City. I was about to start 1st grade. And we moved to Costa Mesa, California in 1969. And you couldn't find a bagel within like 100 miles of Costa Mesa or Newport Beach. It was like, I think we were like the first four registered Jews in Costa Mesa, you know? My brother and I went to the schoolyard, just like meet the kid. And by the way, in those days, your parents would just say, okay, go walk, you know?
Yeah, walk to school.
And we're playing basketball. And not that me and my brother are any kind of great athletes, but it just happened that we won this basketball game. And this kid says to me, well, you know, I don't care that you won that basketball game because my dad told me you and your family are nothing but a bunch of dirty Jews from New York. So,
Wow.
right? I'm like,
Yeah.
wait a minute. In slow motion, I can see it now. My hand goes back like this. And to date, up until then and since then, I have never raised my hand trying to hurt somebody. And it wasn't even like me doing it. And I can see it in slow motion. I go like this, I go boom. And I go, boom. And I hit him in the forehead. And I still can see him going backwards in slow motion. And then behind him, the basketball pole, right?
Oh,
And he goes,
shit.
ping. I heard the ping. He goes sliding down the pole. I burst out into tears and I start tearing it, running home. And I run home and I grab my mom. My brother's like following behind me. I was like, Mom, we have to go back to New York. I just killed somebody. And anyway, me and this kid ended up becoming great friends. You know, most of that stuff is always just like people don't know and people are misinformed and people are ignorant to what people really are. We ended up becoming great friends, but that's my meet you by the water fountain story. That wasn't by the water fountain, but I mean, I was like, and the idea that like I thought if I killed somebody, we'd be okay if we went back to New York is
right.
pretty 5-year-old thinking, but it was pretty funny.
That's pretty good, man.
But no other fight stories,
Okay, so Calabash Street
right?
was after Calabasas. And then after Calabash Street, we moved to Northridge. And there was this hot girl that lived across the street, Stephanie Hayes.
Wow.
She
Stephanie, if you're out there and you're
She
single.
was really hot, but she had a big brother named Steve.
Ah,
And one day, Steve decided to start pounding me. And my
not,
brother-
wait a minute, clarify? Can you?
beating me up.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, that came out wrong, didn't it? Okay, so
Whoa.
my brother Keith.
Talk about revenge of the nerds.
My brother Keith pulls up in the school bus and sees this happening, and he just takes care of Steve Hayes. My brother Keith saved me.
Wow. And your brother Keith, one of the finest gentlemen I've had the pleasure of knowing, has always been there for you, right?
Yes. As my brother David used to say, Keith is the white sheep of the family.
Clarify.
Well, like you just said, he's one of the
Right. And
kindest, most gentle people around.
And John, you know, John Carradine, your dad was a bit of a carouser, and Dave was a bit of a carouser, and you're the gray sheep of the family. You've got a heart of gold yourself.
Yeah, I don't take this the wrong way, but I go both ways.
But you really, I mean, you've shared a lot with me, and you had a really interesting growing up.
I spent my summers on Catalina Island, starting at 7 years old. I would never send my 7-year-old son to a summer camp for 12 weeks. I just wouldn't do it. 12 weeks. But I loved it. I was there every summer for 9 years. It was primarily a sailing camp, and I became a very good sailor as a result. In fact, my father always wanted to be a sea captain. So in the 40s, he bought a 65-foot schooner, and he and Humphrey Bogart and James Cagney, all these guys had boats.
Mm-hmm.
And they were sailing around and drinking in the Santa Monica Bay. And we would sail to Catalina from Oxnard. He had a slip at the Channel Islands Harbor.
And you told me, and we have to share this story with the audience because I think it's very important information. If you're a regular at a bar, you told me about.
Okay, so we go to my dad's favorite bar at the Channel Islands Harbor. And we pull up to the bar, and we're sitting there. And the bartender says, "Hello, John. What'll it be?" Well, I said to Dad, "Dad, come on. He knows what it'll be. I mean, you're in here every night." He says, "Well, son, he's a gentleman, and he understands that if I had a lady friend with me, he wouldn't want her to think I'm a lush
There
by
you
knowing
go.
what I drink."
So you don't want to say it's the usual, right?
Right, exactly.
Although-
Don't say that. If you're a bartender, don't say that.
But I think we've hit it for now, Bobby.
I think it's good. Where's the camera?
There's yours.
Oh, okay. Thanks for tuning in.
And we will see you next time from high atop the woodland hills of Los Angeles, California.
You're not there, man. You're not there.
We'll see you next time. Thanks so much, Bobby. It was fun.